Hi everyone, so we're back in Virginia Civics and Economics, and this time we're in Chapter 3, Section 2, Part 1. And if you have the following book, you can follow along with us. The SOL standards discussed in this section are: describe the freedoms of religion, speech, press, assembly, and petition, describe the duties of citizenship, examine the responsibility to register and vote, and practice service to the school and local community. And this movie, we're going to talk about this first one. So the vocabulary in this section is rule of law, jury of peers, witnesses, common good, and candidate. The agenda for this section is we're going to split this PowerPoint into two sections so that it's just easier for you to watch. This is part one, this movie's part one, and we're going to talk about rights. The next movie that you'll watch is duties and responsibilities, part two. These are all the rights and duties and responsibilities of how to become a citizen. And just remember that last section, we did talk about how to become a citizen. So now we're talking about what happens when you're finally one. What are your rights, finally being an American citizen? What are your duties? And what are your responsibilities? So we're sort of building on this a little bit. We started this whole movie series talking about America in general and what we value and things like that. And now we're going down into specifics. What is your job as an American citizen? What do you do for society? So before we begin, please write down on your paper the answer to this question as you can think of it now. So pause and write this answer down. Please think of anything that you might want to change about your school or community for the better. What are these things? Alright, so we're going to start with the First Amendment rights. And they are the right to freedom of religion, freedom of speech, press, assembly, and petition. And these five are SOL rights that you need to know. And what I want you to do is, as we go through this movie, think about, how you can utilize your rights in these rights listed to better your community, to better those things you wrote down as per your answer to the last question. And again, we talked about values at the very beginning of this movie lecture. These movie lectures, in chapter 1 and chapter 2. And so everything that we talk about in this section as well is based on our fundamental American values of equal respect, freedom, equality, and justice. I just want to take a moment and sort of get you guys to see how this is building on each other. We talked about what these fundamental values were before in past videos. And now we're saying, as a citizen, these rights are based on those values. So we're going to start with the First Amendment rights to religion. So government may not establish an official religion and endorse an official religion or unduly interfere with the free exercise of religion. So one of the current conflicts, one of the current questions that is posed towards this amendment, towards this freedom, is the pledge. And you may notice every time we see the pledge in the morning, many people say under God in the pledge. And the Supreme Court basically has said, we as teachers can't force you to say the pledge, but we can force you to show respect during the pledge. So if you're talking to your friends during the pledge, or running around the room during the pledge, we can stop that. But we can't force you to actively say the pledge in class if you do not want to, for whatever reason. Alright, First Amendment rights. The second right in the First Amendment is press. And the right is, the press has the right to gather and publish information, including that which criticize the government. And how it affects you is newspapers in school. There's usually a newspaper in high school where you're going to next year. And sometimes in middle school they have a newspaper. And so there's been some cases that have looked at, what can you say in school newspapers? And according to that cartoon on the bottom, you apparently can't call the principal poopy pants. in the newspaper. And the idea behind this is that because writing a newspaper is an educational endeavor, we're actually teaching you something, the school has the right to sort of look at what you write in there and make sure that, it does not substantially affect the educational environment. So, for example, some cases have shown principals, throwing out news articles from school newspapers that were about drugs. Some newspaper articles from school news have been thrown out because they criticized the principal unduly or criticized the teachers unduly. The whole point is the school has the right to ensure a good educational environment. And if you write something in the school newspaper that sort of is aggressive against that, the school might have a right to sort of get rid of that from the newspaper. Now, it doesn't mean you can't criticize the principal. It just means that you have to write it in such a way that ensures a good school environment, ensures that everybody can still learn, still respect the teachers, still do what they need to do. First Amendment rights to speech. Individuals are free to express their opinions and beliefs without undue government interference. The key parts of this that affect you directly is, per that picture to the left, you are not allowed to yell fire in a crowded theater. And the idea behind this is you are not allowed to express your speech if it is dangerous to other people around you. So if you yell fire in a crowded theater, you might cause a stampede. The stampede might cause people to injure each other because they're running on top of each other and breaking bones and that type of thing. So you are not allowed by your speech to endanger other people. That part on the right is a famous court case called Tinker and Des Moines. And this was a group of students who were wearing black armbands to school to protest a war that we were in. And basically what the court said is that you as students are allowed to do political protests in school, but they must not substantially interfere with the educational environment. So, for example, it should not be you and a bunch of students, taking 2 weeks off of school and never doing your homework and never turning anything in and, saying we're going to protest and secretly being at Starbucks instead of at school. Basically what the Supreme Court says is you still have to do your homework. You still have to learn. You still have to participate in school. But as long as, your teachers work with you to promote this educational environment well, and, you're not interfering with other people's learning, and you're not interfering with your classmates' learning, you're generally in the right in whatever speech you choose to do. Another First Amendment right is the right towards assembly. And so this right says individuals may peaceably gather. That means you can peaceably gather outside of school if you want to, as long as you're ensuring this proper educational environment, as long as you are still learning, as long as your classmates are still learning, as long as you're not interfering with a person's capability of learning or the school's capability to function well. You also have a right to petition. Individuals have the right to make their views known to public officials. And so you can think of it as this way. If you have a problem with what's in the cafeteria for food one day, you have a right to write a letter to the principal and go around to your classmates and get them to sign the letter saying that you want this thing in the cafeteria changed. And so if you get enough students to sign it, those students signing it are basically expressing their agreement with you that this thing in the cafeteria needs to be changed. And then you show it to the principal. The principal does not necessarily have to honor it, but the principal has to give you that right to make your view known. So the principal has to allow you the right to create a petition. It's just the principle does not necessarily have to honor it. But as long as the petition is reasonable, as long as you're not saying, you should fire this person for no reason, then, you're pretty good. It just has to be reasonable. Some further rights you have is the right to a fair trial. Basically, if you get in trouble and you have to go to court and you get pulled over by cops and you have to go to court because you broke the law or something, you have the right for that moment to be fair to you. And finally, you have the right to vote and hold elected office, and we'll talk about that a little bit more in the next video. So, as we conclude, I want you to just take the rights we learned and ask yourself this and write it down on your paper, your answer. How might you utilize these rights in school to change things you wrote down about your school community? For example, are there any things about the school that you might want to change? Would you want to change it through a petition? Would you want to change it through peacefully gathering? Brainstorm that and write it down on your paper.